Building wealth gets confusing when you're asking the wrong questions. Which stock should I buy? Should I wait for the market to dip? Am I saving enough? Those questions aren't bad, but they're not always the most important ones, especially if you're asking them at the wrong stage of your financial life. Nick Maggiulli's Just Keep Buying is one of the most data-grounded personal finance books written in the last decade. In this video, we're breaking down 7 lessons from the book, and by lesson 6, you'll see why waiting for the perfect time to invest may cost more than you think. Let's get into it. Lesson 1. Focus on the right financial lever for your stage. Here's something most financial advice skips over. Early in your financial life, when your portfolio is small, your savings rate and your income matter far more than your investment decisions. But later, when your portfolio has grown, your investment behavior starts to matter more than how much you save each month. Maggiulli calls this the Save-Invest Continuum, and it's a useful framework because it tells you where to focus your energy right now. Think about it this way. If you have $5,000 invested and it grows 10% this year, that's $500 in gains. But if you're able to save a few $100s each month, your contributions may matter more than your investment returns at that stage. Your savings rate is doing more of the heavy lifting than your portfolio. But as your portfolio grows, investment growth can start contributing more to your wealth than your monthly savings. The math begins to flip. So, if you're early in your journey and you're spending hours obsessing over ETFs and asset allocation, that energy might be better spent finding ways to earn more and save more. Get the order right. The right question changes depending on where you are. Lesson 2. Save what you can, not what a rule tells you. A lot of financial advice gives people fixed savings rules. Save 15% of your income. Save 20%. Save this exact amount by this age. Those rules can be useful as rough guides, but they can also create unnecessary guilt. The data helps explain why those rules don't work for everyone. In the US, research cited by Maggiulli estimated that the bottom 20% of earners saved roughly 1% of their income annually. Not because everyone in that group lacks discipline, but because lower income often leaves far less room to save. Telling someone in that position to save 20% isn't advice. It's pressure without a solution, and the pressure itself is part of the problem. The book also points to research showing that money has long been one of the biggest sources of stress for many people in America. Worrying constantly about whether you're saving enough doesn't always lead to better decisions. Sometimes it just creates anxiety. Maggiulli's advice is refreshingly honest. Save what you can. That's not permission to be careless. It's permission to stop measuring your discipline against a benchmark that wasn't built for your situation. Save something. Save consistently, and increase it as your income grows. A sustainable habit beats a perfect number you can never hit. Lesson 3. Cutting costs has a ceiling. Income doesn't. There are only 2 ways to save more money: earn more or spend less. The conventional personal finance message is spend less, save more. Track your expenses. Cut unnecessary spending. And yes, unnecessary spending is worth reviewing. But here's something worth remembering. For many lower-income households, basic necessities already consume most of what they earn. Housing, food, healthcare, and transportation leave very little room to cut further. That's why just spend less isn't always a complete solution. Spending has a floor. You can only reduce it so far. Income, on the other hand, has much more room to grow. Maggiulli's argument is that the more scalable path to building wealth is growing your income, and then directing that additional income into assets that work for you. That could mean developing a skill that commands a higher salary. It could mean a side project, freelance work, or simply negotiating better compensation. The method depends on your situation, but the direction is the same. Frugality can protect what you have. Income growth expands what's possible. Lesson 4. Spend without guilt, but spend with alignment. This lesson is about something most finance content avoids: the emotional weight of spending money. A lot of people who are trying to build wealth carry quiet guilt about spending on themselves. They feel like every non-essential purchase is a step backward, and that guilt, over time, either leads to burnout or silent resentment toward the whole process. Maggiulli offers a practical idea called the 2 times rule. The concept is simple. When you spend on something that feels indulgent, a nice dinner, a purchase you've been wanting, invest the same amount into income-producing assets, or donate it. The act of matching it with something productive removes the guilt and keeps your financial momentum intact. You don't need to follow the rule perfectly for the idea to be useful. The deeper point is this: money is meant to improve your life. Not just your future life, but your actual present life. The goal isn't to eliminate spending. The goal is to make sure your spending reflects what genuinely matters to you, rather than habit or impulse. Wealth building shouldn't feel like punishment. When it does, it becomes harder to sustain. Lesson 5. Volatility is not the enemy. It's the entry fee. When markets drop, people panic. That's human. Watching a number go down, especially when it represents your savings, triggers a real emotional response. But Maggiulli makes a case that's worth sitting with. Volatility isn't a malfunction in the investment system. It is the system. It's the price you pay for the long-term returns that stocks and other growth assets have historically provided. The discomfort is built into the deal. Think of it this way: if markets only ever went up smoothly, everyone would invest everything they had. The very reason growth assets offer meaningful long-term returns is because they're uncertain in the short term. That uncertainty is what keeps the opportunity available. The investors who build wealth over decades aren't the ones who found a way to avoid the drops. They're the ones who stayed invested through them. You don't earn the upside by avoiding the downside. You earn it by tolerating the downside long enough. This is not a call to be reckless. It's a call to be patient and to understand what you're actually signing up for when you invest. And once you accept volatility, the next question becomes, when should you actually invest? Lesson 6. Don't wait for the perfect time to invest. This might be the most important lesson in the book. Maggiulli ran a data simulation with 2 investors. The first invests a fixed amount every single month. No timing, no waiting, just consistency. The second has a remarkable edge. They can see exactly when the market will hit its lowest point, and they only buy then. Perfect timing, every time. On paper, the second investor should win easily. But when Maggiulli tested this across decades of real market history, the consistent investor kept pace with, or outperformed the perfect timer in most periods tested. Why? Because by the time a meaningful dip arrives, the consistent investor's earlier purchases have already been compounding for months or years. Waiting for the perfect moment means missing that growth. And most of the time, the dip never justifies the wait. Time in the market did more work than perfect timing ever could. The cost of waiting for the right moment is usually higher than the cost of buying at an imperfect one. Most investors don't lose because they bought on the wrong day. They lose because they stayed on the sideline long enough to miss years of growth. Lesson 7. Build wealth by owning income-producing assets. This is the lesson the entire book builds toward. Maggiulli's philosophy centers on owning income-producing assets, things like stocks, index funds, real estate, and businesses. Assets that generate ongoing value tied to real economic activity, not just what someone might pay for them tomorrow. He makes a distinction that's worth understanding: the difference between non-income-producing assets and income-producing assets. Non-income-producing assets don't generate cash flow on their own, so their value depends largely on what someone else is willing to pay for them later. Income-producing assets are different. They generate ongoing value through cash flow, ownership, or real economic activity, not just market sentiment. A stock, a rental property, a business. These are assets anchored to something real. The core idea behind Just Keep Buying, and the philosophy behind the title, is this: make the consistent purchase of income-producing assets a habit, not a one-time decision. The same way you pay rent, buy groceries, or pay your phone bill, you're not trying to time it perfectly. You're not waiting for the ideal entry point. You're building ownership consistently over time. At some point in your financial life, the shift happens. Your money stops being only something you spend. It becomes something that works alongside you, and eventually for you. That is the entire game. So, to bring it together, Just Keep Buying isn't really about one rule. It's about understanding where you are, removing the noise, and building a system that's simple enough to actually follow. Focus on the right lever for your stage. Save what you can. Grow your income. Spend without guilt, but with intention. Accept volatility for what it is. Stop waiting for the perfect moment. And keep building ownership. Those 7 ideas won't make you rich overnight, but over a decade of consistent application, they tend to produce real results. If this kind of thinking resonates with you, there's more of it on this channel. Subscribe if you want to keep learning. And if you're looking for what to watch next, I'd recommend my summary of The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins, linked on screen now. Thanks for watching.